Hello, welcome in or welcome back to my channel. My name is Deb from DG Reads and this is my furry sidekick Kylie, and it's time for the Mid-Year Freakout tag. I am legit a little bit freaked out that we are actually at the halfway point of the year. This year has been rough on many levels. There have been a lot of high points too, but a lot of really, really low points. And I think some of that's been reflected in my reading, although I've really been using books as a way to escape reality throughout the year, so I haven't really taken a hit to my reading amount. As of this point, which is about a day and a half before the month actually ends in June, I've read about 95,000 pages and 294 books. So it's been a good reading year for me. And I've had a lot of books that I've truly loved. I've had some disappointments too. So it was fun to kind of go through the Mid-Year Freakout tag questions and kind of think things through. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the questions. I do want to say that I pulled these questions from Becca at Becca and the Books because she's the first creator that I kind of remembered seeing do this tag. So I don't know if there's different versions out there or an original creator I should be crediting that I'm not aware of, but I did just want to put that in there. So without further ado, let's look at the questions. First question is the best book I've read in 2025. And honestly, this was really, really hard. So I'm going with a book I loved and also a reading situation that I loved and just a reading experience that I loved. And I'm going to say Glow of the Everflame was my favorite so far this year. This is a book that I picked up in person at an author event with Penn Cole, which was a lot of fun. I got to meet a couple of friends from BookTube during that event, Bree at Four Paws in a Book and Claire at Claire's Neverland of Books. I told the author when I was having this signed that I was planning to take it with me on vacation, and I did. I read this sitting by the pool, absolutely immersed in this read in Mexico, having a fantastic time with my best friend. And overall, the fact that I loved this book and that I had the absolute best time on every level of buying it and reading it makes this my top read of 2025 so far. In this series, we're following DM, and there is a world that's divided by those with power, without power, different classes, good versus evil, but nothing is as it seems. And I can't wait to read book 3 and to hear when we're getting book 4. So I'm super excited to continue and finish this series. Question 2 is for best sequel, and Glow of the Everflame could have worked for that as well, but I decided to go with another one that has been a great reading experience, and that is Ruin by John Gwynne. And what makes this even better is this is a second chance read for me. I made the mistake the first time I picked up the Faithful and the Fallen series of reading too much of it on audio, and there's so many POVs in here. Each book gets more, and doing this purely on audio, I kind of lost touch with the characters, with everything going on, even though I really, really loved the first book, Malice. With this being the Catch Up Book Club's books for Faith Follow Along, I picked these up. I spent the time going through it physically, tabbing all the POVs so I could switch back and forth if I wanted to and remember what had gone on before. And being a co-host with this group and discussing these books, it has been such a fantastic time reading, and I can't believe how much more I'm loving these now that I am taking more time with them and spending time physically reading these. Sometimes I am a huge proponent of reading audiobooks, and audiobooks are equal to eyeball reading or any format you might read, but there are some books that for me personally just hit better in one format or the other, and this one definitely hit better in print, and I can't wait to be reading the final book in this original quartet at the end of July. The next question is asking what are some new releases that you haven't read yet but you really want to, and I have a couple. Actually, I have a ton, but I narrowed it down to 2. The Dark Mirror by Samantha Shannon is the latest book in the Bone season, and it's one that I was so excited to get to, and I can't believe I haven't picked it back up. I reread the entire series before this came out to make sure I was prepared, and I can't wait to get into this one. I need to get it like onto an official TBR so I have that extra push to pick it back up, but this is a series I absolutely adore, and I can't wait to read the latest installment. Another one that I've been highly anticipating is Overgrowth by Mira Grant. Mira Grant is an absolute auto read author for me. I've really loved her other kind of sci-fi horror blend books, and I really love her other books under her name Shauna McGuire. So this is one I can't believe I haven't picked up yet. Not only do I have a special edition here, this is the Owl Crate version, but I also own an Illumicrate version of this and a regular version that it was sent to me by the publisher. So I have no excuse not to have read this yet. All I know is it's sci-fi horror plants in space, maybe? or at least an apocalyptic alien invasion. So this is high, high, high on my priority list. The next question is for what are your anticipated releases for the second half of the year? And I have two that are high on my list. And one is Catabasis by R.F. Kuang. I don't even really know what this is about, but I've had it pre-ordered, the Barnes & Noble special edition, and it's one that has been calling to me. The cover's interesting. This is an author I've absolutely loved in multiple books before, so I have high, high hopes for this one. And then the second one is Brimstone by Callie Hart. This is the sequel to Quicksilver, which I absolutely loved. I'm not 100% in love with the new cover for this one, but I am definitely on the lookout for different editions. It is a story that I'm really looking forward to continuing on with. I have it already in mind for my TBR as soon as it hits the shelves. In terms of books that were my biggest disappointment, I think the one that absolutely stands out in my mind is Rebel Witch by Kristen Ciccarelli. After loving The Crimson Moth so much, I went into this with the absolute highest of hopes, and it just didn't work for me. There were pacing issues, there were questionable decisions, I felt like there were plot holes, and ultimately this wound up being like a 2.53 for me. There were parts of it I enjoyed. I still enjoyed the characters here and there, but I really just wanted to shake them on the decisions they were making. I felt like the twists and turns to the story were predictable, and it just fell flat. And partially that was probably high expectations going into it, but honestly, it just didn't hold my attention. The first book I binged in basically 24 hours. Second book was a struggle to get through. On the flip side of that, for the question of what was your biggest surprise, I think probably House of Bane and Blood by Alexis L. Menard was one that I went into with a lot of reservations. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about this. I'm still kind of trying to piece together when people are raving about romantasy, which ones are going to work for me and which ones aren't, because I go into a romantasy looking more for the fantasy side of it. The banter and the relationship I do really enjoy. I'm not so much here for the smut. Nothing wrong with smut, but that's not what I want throughout the book just for the sake of it being there. And there were some things about this one that made me think, ooh, interesting world. There were things about this where people were talking about the smut and I wasn't so sure. But I wound up absolutely binging through this as part of my Reading Booktubers Favorites video and loving it. And the world is exactly what drew me into it. The banter between our characters, absolutely. And the sequel lived up to the hype of the first book for me. So this is an author I definitely would trust to pick up more from in the future. And the fact that many of my friends here on BookTube were raving about this one, obviously I can trust them. And I think they're figuring out too what's a me book, what's not, when I go to them for advice. But even on this one, they weren't sure. So I was really pleasantly surprised. The next question is for a favorite new author. And for this one, I have The Austen Sisters by Dee Blankenship. And this is an author that I know personally. She was one of the first people I actually met in person from Bookstagram. We co-host a classics buddy read over on Bookstagram. And when she was writing this book, I was really eager to find out more about it and looked forward to reading it. But there's always that little bit of nervousness of, I really like this person. Am I going to like their book? If I don't, if I hate it, and she sent me a free copy, what am I going to do? But I'm very happy to say that I really, really did fall in love with this. It's an amalgamation of Jane Austen's heroines brought together in this book as sisters. And each of the sisters kind of gets their own POV. They get a romance reminiscent of the Austen romance from their original book. And this wound up being just such a win for me. I wasn't sure, but it's brought into the modern world in such a creative way. And having read the Jane Austen novels often with Dee as part of our buddy read, I think being able to pick out kind of nods to the original, nods to Jane Austen and the different side characters, and it just was a fabulous time, and I can't wait to see what Dee does next. The next question is about a fictional crush, and I don't really have fictional crushes. I've always said it's because I read dark books and they're not the people I would want to have crushes on. In reality, that's not always the case. I am reading some books that aren't so dark, but I feel like I still don't necessarily develop book crushes, so I don't have anything for this one. I think there's a rule in my mind that you get to skip one question, and I think this is mine. In terms of a new favorite character, I'm actually going to go right back to the Austen sisters. The second I started this book, we opened the book with Eleanor, and she's the oldest sister. She's a very practical character. She's very anxious about traveling, and her whole scene at the opening of this book of getting through the airport, going off to travel, having to check everything twice and just the anxiety that she has until she gets aboard a plane. I 100% related to Eleanor. I immediately messaged Dee and said, this is me. And I think that was just a lot of fun to kind of see how that played out in here after I immediately connected with her at the beginning of the book. So I'm going to say Eleanor in this book is my favorite. For a book that made me cry, I don't think I've had any book this year totally get me broken down into tears. But there is one that definitely called out to me as I was looking at this list and thinking about it. And that is What Does It Feel Like by Sophie Kinsella. This is a book about a woman with a terminal diagnosis. She is going through trying to deal with this, come to terms with this, with her family, with everything else. It's a short novella. It's very personal to the author, from what I understand. And this was actually on my January TBR. And not knowing when I put it on my TBR that we were going to lose my mother on the first of the year, I wound up deciding to take it right back off my TBR for understandable reasons. I finally did pick it up last month, I believe it was, and I still definitely got into my feelings about things. I think it was good. It was cathartic. It wasn't exactly the same as my mother's situation, but it definitely had some parallels that I felt. In terms of causing me tears, it didn't really, and I think that's just my emotions have been all over the place this year, but it definitely had me thinking and feeling and so forth. Today, it almost got me in tears because I cannot for the life of me find my copy of this book. It is teeny. It's a novella. So the fact that it's probably slipped between two different books somewhere and I'm just entirely missing it was frustrating me to no end, so I gave up looking. But this is my book for this prompt. I mean, the publisher sent it to me with tissues, so that does say something about the book. And then in terms of a book that made you happy, I took this in a different direction than I think the intent, because I am putting A Memory of Light by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson on my list for this one. And it's not that I loved the book. I did not. I was just really happy to be able to claim I've finished the series. To have made it through the entirety of Wheel of Time, I feel like is an accomplishment. It's definitely a series where I had highs and lows. There were some really, really low lows and some decent highs along the way. But honestly, the experience again of reading this with Sandra Got a Thing for Things, Becca in the books, and Amberly, and having that kind of camaraderie through that was a lot of fun. And it really was a celebration moment when I finished that last page. So I just had to put that on here. For the prettiest book that I bought this year, I decided to leave out my special editions from book boxes because I don't really get a say in whether I buy those or not for the prettiness of them. I don't know what they look like when I order my book boxes. So I decided to look at what books I specifically bought because they were pretty editions and not necessarily knowing anything about the book. And one that definitely got ordered purely because it was gorgeous and I felt the need to have it show up at my door shortly after publication date was Shield of Sparrows by Devney Perry. This is a Red Tower edition, just your regular first print edition, but it is a gorgeous edition. And I mean, even the cover alone is pretty, but adding the sprayed edges and everything else. As an actual bonus, I loved the book. So it is not always the case with the Red Tower books that I enjoy them as much as I enjoy how pretty they are. So this was a definite solid win for me. This is a romantasy that has a good solid fantasy world building built into it that I really, really enjoyed. I liked the relationship that we get between our leads and the banter and the training scenes, and the twists and turns in here were pretty predictable, I would say, but I didn't mind because I was just having so much fun with it. And again, it's pretty on my shelf. The next question is about the best adaptation that I've seen this year, from something going from a book to film. And I don't think I've actually watched any adaptations that I've loved. I've been slowly chipping away at Wheel of Time, but I haven't really gotten fully invested. And now that I know it got canceled prematurely, I'm not really motivated to continue there. But ones that are absolutely on my watch list that I'm super excited for currently are Murderbot, because I absolutely loved the series from Martha Wells and recently finished that earlier this year, or maybe at the end of last year. Either way, I'm really excited to check this one out and how they adapt it to TV. And then also the movie Long Bright River. This was a novel by Liz Moore, another one that I really loved. There's a sister relationship, there's a gritty kind of drug scene, and a detective looking into things, and I loved the book. It was a definite 5-star read, one I recommended widely, so I do need to go ahead and watch that one pretty soon. And then the last question is, what books do you need to finish by the end of the year? And There are many. There are very, very many. I picked a few, and you're going to notice there's a theme to them. Heavenly Tyrant is one that I pre-ordered in special edition from Illumicrate. It is one that I've been very eagerly waiting for. It took a while for the sequel to come out, which means I do need to do a reread of Iron Widow, but this is high on my priority list. It's a duology. It would finish a series, which is something I desperately need to do. And they're pretty, and I pre-ordered them. And if I'm spending that much money pre-ordering them, I really should spend some time reading them. A final book that needs to get read, there's no excuse why I haven't yet, is The Angel of Indian Lake by Stephen Graham Jones. And I loved books 1 and 2 in this series, and they were such good audiobook listens, and it would be so easy to add this to my TBR and just finish a series. And it's one that I keep putting off. I don't know why. It just kind of slips a little bit out of sight, out of mind, maybe? I don't know. And then the final book that I'm absolutely committed to reading before the end of the year is Oathbound by Tracy Deonn. Even though I have read that we are getting a 4th book in the series, so Oathbound will not be finishing things off, I really want to get caught up on this series and be ready for the final book. I recently this year finally reread Legendborn, still loved it, and picked up Bloodmarked, the sequel, just this month in June, so I am ready to pick up Oathbound. I am hoping we don't have to wait too long before book 4 comes out. I know originally this was meant to be a trilogy, so I was surprised to learn we were getting a 4th book, but honestly, I don't mind too much because I've been having so much fun with these books, and I'm eager to see where book 3 takes us. So with that, I am excited for my July reading, for my rest of the year reading. I have so much I want to accomplish between reading, between content creation, between everything else. As you saw from that last question, a lot of my plans do center on series. That's going to be a big push for me over the next 6 months, over the next year, to get caught up on some of my series. I'm going to be bringing kind of a list of priorities out relatively soon, in probably early August. But let me know in the comments below, what has been your favorite book of 2025? Or what are you most looking forward to in the second half of the year? Or the answers to any of these other questions. I will include the question list below as well, because I appreciated it when Becca did it, so I can pay that forward. And if you've made it this far and you don't have anything to say, how about leaving me an angel emoji? Because I think The Angel of Indian Lake is the book that I am most overdue on finally reading. If you could hit that like button below, I would surely appreciate it, and subscribe if you're interested in more of my reading plans, more of my book reviews, and more of my bookish content in general. But for now, I'll leave you here and see you real soon in a new video.